The world stopped and listened to him at 16. One song came out, millions sold records, stages erupted with screams that people and Paul Anka's name was everywhere, ensuring absolute musical success. He was number one in music composing when other artists were dreaming of their first success for himself and the century's biggest talents. However, another spiral began immediately. To form. Silently, relentlessly, cruelly, early success for Paul Anka was countered by a new wave. From teen within years, Idol was considered outmoded. He sold tens of millions of records that dropped by labels, wiped from radio, and viewed by the market as already done. He did not fall. Anka discreetly went another way, composing his own music, writing for others, and running the show from behind the scenes. But success was never free. Traveling non-stop, performing all night, and making frigid decisions, survival cracked his personal life. Man who wrote timeless love songs was always absent from his family. A stage master with impeccable control, a decades-long downfall left them powerless. Therefore, Paul Anka's story is not just the history of renowned songs, but a long war between talent, ambition, and the cost of early and long-term success in music. Too long. The conflict between fame and its price was not accidental. It was formed early in a world where discipline, labor, and ambition coexisted. Long before he became famous, Paul Anka was born 1941 in Ottawa, into a poor Lebanese immigrant family with order and rhythm. His dad Andrew Anka ran Lakanda, a small restaurant. No luxury here but a work-intensive space. From daylight until night, that restaurant greeting all music customers. Local officials, journalists, artists, workers. Paul didn't only follow his father's career. His first class taught him how people watched, how music connects and grabs attention. He witnessed his father work non-stop, remembering the faces, regular clients, speak and grin at the correct time, real-life performance without a script stage. His mother Shyamala brought Lebanese music into their little home, lullabies and folk tunes. The skill of music was not taught. Music permeated daily life organically and continuously. Ottawa's St. Elijah Church. Paul began singing as a child in Syria, Lebanon. Not to stand out, but because singing there was a ritual. Environment taught him a sense of discipline, rhythm, and accuracy. One false note might derail the choir. As a teen, Paul was musically different from his peers. He didn't await discovery. He taught himself keyboard and guitar, created songs in class, started a band in his family basement, and practiced late at night beside restaurant tomato crates when too young to perform lawfully. He circumvented the rules. Barricades, singing for free, and accepting police warnings if was allowed to stand on a stage. Initial performances lacked meaningful money, but they provided him more, a sense of control, space, and audience. Therefore, Paul Anka's boyhood was music molded by invisible pressure. He had to go fast. He had to go far, not allowed to slow down. He became an adult with that beat. Premature world. With a guitar, loads of self-written tunes, and the notion that if he didn't, he never wait for doors, open them yourself. From those unpaid jobs, Paul Anka left the nest before most children his age with self-made stage entrances. Fled Ottawa before he could grow up. Music, containing adolescent recklessness and one instinct absolutely clear. Life would slow if he stayed. Los Angeles and New York were not promised lands, but changed doors that opened and closed randomly. The first auditions were silent. Early recordings had no effect. Industry people's polite nods typically ended in endless waiting. But in those infrequent encounters, he discovered the game's song structure. Who managed harmony? Broadcaster who? Schedule? Who decided if a music could live? Don ABC, Paramount, and Costa did not appear miraculously. They reached appropriate time when Anka was tough enough to keep going after rejection. Turning point came from teen musical trembling. Diana was created from a boy's misunderstanding, not love. Confronting a girl who was almost stranger, a shadow expanded by our imagination. This incompleteness helped the song reach the masses. Simple lyrics, a memorable melody, and undefended emotions. When record released, the reaction was immediate. It erupted. Charts changed color in short term. Sales reached millions. The name of a teenager was spoken in many nations that hadn't graduated. Several albums followed. Awards and packed tour schedules inundated his desk, leaving no room to breathe. Early fame meant his tour schedules took over life. Flights piled up, shows overlapped, interviews repeated the same queries. Everything pushed his rhythm beyond a 16-year-old's musical self-adjustment, or 17 years old. Paul and Anka became a global teen idol, but privacy gradually shrunk. The crowd excitement yielded quiet fatigue. Music ran faster, time with family slipped. The contradiction did not explode instantly. It accumulated quietly, covered in cheers and stage lights, establishing the groundwork for his future struggle. Decades between accelerating to stay ahead and paying the price when he could no longer rewind music. Even before Diana's wave settled, Paul Anka was rotated harder. How not to become disposable due of his success. Late 1950s, the music industry swiftly adapted to eating young faces. One song may lift someone high, but it may eternally mark them as that summer lad. Anka grasped this earlier than others and did not flee to expand the teen idol image within. From 1958 until the early 1960s had songs like Put Your Head on My Shoulder, Lonely Boy, and Puppy Love. Relentlessly on the radio. They appeared to be simple love songs for youthful audiences, but songwriting structure altered. Melodies were calculated more carefully. Not merely feelings were expressed in the lyrics. A consistent narrative rhythm was constructed. Peaks and pauses. Anka stopped writing like a boy. Liking someone confused him. He wrote music like someone who knew what 3 minutes on a radio broadcast requires, music, to affect the listener. These songs sold and stayed on the charts, showing it wasn't luck but craft. While at the microphone, Anka spent more time at the desk. He saw how producers modified tempos to meet different markets, how harmonies were crafted, and how a song may have survived after losing its voice. He was no longer the punctual young singer in the studio. Left. He kept listening and adjusting every detail. In music, this phase, his professional perception changed. No longer simply music record-selling face, Anka grasped structure at a hitmaker who could write and perform songs. That change, it was quiet, yet psychologically draining. The more he established his writing seriousness, the more he had to work to avoid appearing to fleet at the teen idol label. The tour schedule was rigorous. The data label's sales expectations remained. The yearning to be known as a musician grew stronger. That psychological fight made Anka mature faster than his age, learning to make a song last after the stage lights went out and laying the first stone for an even bigger change. Writing hits for other voices without his help record cover with personal name. He made it as a songwriter. Not only a face in front of the camera, Paul Anka left fingerprints whose historical weight even he could not predict. In late 1958, Anka, a teen icon, wrote, "It doesn't matter anymore for Buddy Holly." The song's tone was different than what his viewers expected from him. Slow, resigned, hot. No more music represents embracing a past loss, not first love. Soon after, Buddy Holly plane crash killed him. The song became an accidental goodbye. Ascending the charts amid sadness. Instead of treating it as unexpected income, Anka remitted all royalties to Holly's widow discreetly. Decision was made not advertised, required no remark, yet garnered sharp industry attention. Moral line. For him, music was more than a transaction. Entering early 1960 SAS American television became the nightly cultural focus. Anka featured again in a different spot. Invisible but strong. Writing and shaping music. Johnny Carson's Tonight Show theme. Short, brilliant, quick recognition from the first notes. Night after night for decades of music. Without his name, consequently, millions of American families adopted music, making it part of the nation's culture. The daily music beat. In his early 20s, Anka had established his job beyond personal celebrity. A tune strong enough to outlast any visual was required. By the late 1960s, as he entered adulthood, another milestone appeared. French melody Comme d'habitude. Anka rewrote the entire English lyric. Reviving, not translating. My Way told nothing. Particular tale. Music created a spiritual portrait. Reviewing one's life without apology, sans music description. The song broke the hit mold when Frank Sinatra sang it. Declaration. Anka achieved more than professional achievement. Was an interchange. From chart-topping to touching, writing music for youth and legacy, something culturally lasting with a lifetime in each sentence. My Way didn't bring Paul Anka stability. He stepped straight into an earthquake. In a few years, mainstream music changed. The Brits' invasion brought the Beatles and Rolling Stones to America, louder, irreverent, and young, totally distinct song. The previous decade's teen stars become obsolete after one song. Summer. Radio playlists modified, audience tastes altered, and for it was the realization for Anka, who topped the charts before he could drink. If he kept motionless, he'd be whisked away by music. The first thing Anka did was not chase the new trend, but to retract and take control. That he focused on writing for others, where his name would disappear, but his power would remain. Publication, exploitation, and song survival rights are items record labels have grasped closely. He wanted to preserve it for himself. Anka repositioned herself as the adolescent idol persona, lost its appeal, himself as a musical architect who could compose successes for any voice, any generation if he understood market structure. By the early 1970s, adaptation was paying dividends. And She's a Lady was made for Tom Jones in 1970. The music was flashy, manly energy, unlike Anka's modest love songs. Tom Jones shouted it on stage. The song topped international charts and became one of Jones's best songs. Career. It was more than a career revival for Anka. It was. His ability to read crowd psychology was confirmed. Only now had the crowd aged. Bolder and no longer wanted teenage murmurs. Before the wave hit settle, Anka braved another storm. He duet with in the mid-1970s. Adia Coates' You're Having My Baby. The song soared commercially. Blanketing radio. However, it squarely addressed a tense society after Royers Wade. The words and music were slammed as outdated and patriarchal that turned it reactionary. By then, Anka was used to the music and lights and knew what he was doing. Trading. A song can boost a career and hurt a reputation, but he persisted. He accepted the collision and the encroaching debate since silence meant elimination to him. The midleaf those counter-Wes. Paul Anka survived not through nostalgia, but through his ability to read the era, even when it was cruel. After the disputes around 1974's You're Having My Baby, Paul Anka didn't retreat. Spotlight. His terrain altered. From the mid-1970s, Las Vegas became the most constant city for his appearances. Not a celebrity guest, but someone who had claimed the stage. Week-long Sands runs, Caesars and Sahara didn't need noisy promotion. Audiences come because they knew what music was ahead. He ruled the room from the start, never letting go. Night escape him. In the early 1980s, many of his idols has disappeared from big performance schedules. Anka remains. Timely, consistent, and entertaining, rarely altered structure. Radio no longer provided reliable electricity, but Vegas did. No gained authority via precision without having to chase fresh hits. No improvisation allowed for the band. Emotion. Entrances, music pitch, lighting, and song length were closely regulated. For Anka, stages were not for compromise. This space obeyed. That philosophy caused an incident in 1985. An incident occurred during Vegas show rehearsals. Internal audio of Anka's rage at the band was leaked. The shouting, the demands, uncompromising discipline swept fast through the performance industry and beyond. Professional circles into a common tale. Image of man who wrote my way, a symbol of personal freedom, hit a cold, unyielding man obsessed with control. Anka remained in Vegas after the spill. In contrast, he performed as if had nothing to apologize for in subsequent years. For him, the issue was never hearing rage. Stage music functionality was the issue. In Vegas, the city of silent discipline and power, was the only option. Area open to that kind of music. Someone who outlasted trends, but paid. He searched for it alone in his might. From Vegas, Paul Anka never settled into one musical genre. By the late 1980s, well established in Vegas and independent of American charts, he expanded. His teen idol years were different from performing area beyond borders. From 1987, he appeared more often in Italy, France, Monaco, and other European towns, as an artist with a lasting song book, not a transient phenomenon. Stability replaced relentless touring speed these nights. For memory, audiences came. Stayed for performance and returned for unusual familiarity. Modern pop no longer offered. Anka also performed internationally. Continued to appear in television and movies early on, although it grew increasingly visible from the early 1990s. He did movies, sitcoms, talk programs, and games. Sometimes as a guest, sometimes as himself, like an American pop icon. Anka said these visits were aimed to maintain tempo, not reclaim fame. He did not disappear or compete for attention. Music. He was between legend and reality. Man. 2005 was a late but significant turning point. At 64, Anka published Rock Swings, a music project that defies the tide. Rather than following modern music, he brought Nirvana, Oasis, and Soundgarden songs back to swing. Enlarged, he mastered band structures. Not to get younger, but to redefine. Whatever generation, if music may be turned backward into classical music, arranger organized music effectively. No commercial frenzy followed the record. However, it re-established Anka as a creative artist, not only a legacy holder. By 2020, Anka's songs will cycle again. Abruptly began. Younger generations used his song fragments on TikTok, who didn't need historical context. Neither campaign nor image control, no return statement, merely music making its own way. Anka knew the dilemma, that he lost control over how his music was absorbed as he neared death. Yet that very music kept it alive after losing control. That professional growth was not isolated. As Paul Anka's music increasingly connected him to worldwide stages through travel and nights of after two performances, a personal romance silently entered his life. As well. Music initially anchors, then becomes the greatest strain. Private life and professional aspirations. In late 1962, Anka had progressed beyond the teen idol image and was into the adult world of entertainment. He met Andy Zog and was an esteemed Middle Eastern model, Eastern family, with composure, order, and a lifestyle unlike Anka's touring days. Their meeting lacked color. Of an explosion, yet it gradually gave him a unique sense of familiarity, as someone who lived in the spotlight too early. Continuous conversations, flights, and hurried letters between music performances accelerated the connection, as if both parties were involved. They knew Anka's turn would come. Married in 1963 while Anka was transitioning from a teenage star to a serious artist, professional weight. The marriage took on a unique rhythm. The motel was home, dinner was tours, always interrupted family time at the airport. In the years that followed, 5 girls were born. Alexandra, Amanda, Alicia, Amelia, each name representing a different musical stage or a father who was always moving. Music stabilized schooling and daily routines, becoming the household's silent axis that protecting the kids from stardom from a young age. Distance didn't appear by loud scandals. It grew from absences, music, birthdays with empty chairs, and school. Phone recounted performances. Anka still took the kids on trips to stitch the role, father into an artist's regimen, but that rhythm soon showed its limits. As the absence became evident as the children became older, no longer compensable by presence or short visits, and stayed with family's genuine ordinary life. While Anka was pushed back toward the stage, he had to stand to avoid disappearing. Despite years of stress, nothing happened. Public fight, but music deep enough to disintegrate the marriage. Frequent separations and reunions, endeavors to reconcile duty and enthusiasm failed to overcome a rhythm, structuring their lives too long. In 2000, approximately 40 years later, the marriage ended. No scandal, no charges, only a subtle sense of loss for a family trying to exist with a career that never stopped. And never married again and lived quietly until her 2017 death, abandoning 5 daughters and a life inseparable from the music-passionate father. The adult silence after that long marriage with and continued. This spread to 5 each child with the same famous surname went in separate routes. After growing up with their father on stage, they use music to shield themselves. Alexandra, the oldest daughter, left Hollywood early, not in defiance, but off choosing. She sought stable after lights, and touring had erased most family memories. Structures, serious education, law, unassuming career. Alexandra spent much of her life in Europe, where Anka was no longer a music key or shadow. She was an independent musician outside the fame orbit that defined her childhood. Amanda went the other way. She started in Hollywood as a actress before transitioning to producing, which offered more control music instead of fronting the camera. Her marriage to Jason Bateman broadened her musical career, different cinematic family, private, practical, disciplined. Paul's most memorable moment was the father-daughter dance, not a red carpet or awards ceremony during her wedding. rare free time without touring or platforms where fathers weren't second to artists. Alicia chose a road with a clear reflex and softer sound. She walked away from music for wellness, yoga, coaching, spaces centered on listening, presence, and gradual rhythm. Growing up at home where time was always chopped in bits, equilibrium became a survival need, not a fad. Alicia constructed inner stability, something she lacked throughout childhood. Anthea poised between worlds. She wrote, conceived, and scripted for periods, sang duets with her father to reconnect, not for a business purpose, using the family's favorite language, music. Anthea honors her music mother and on her blog after her death. Quiet statements that clearly show how the woman supported the family the father kept moving. She connected the unfinished pieces through writing. Amelia was the most private. She prioritized family and avoiding attention, living as if Anka were a biographical feature, not fate. Rare moment, the granddaughter Inessa sung My Way alongside her grandfather, exposing that world to public music in a family music instruction context, not on stage. A song, once related to Paul's personal path, it became intergenerational, no longer about the artist's ego, but memory transmission. When the family ties seemed to have stabilized with grown children and a less hectic lifestyle, the pace and intensity of Anka's relationship changed. Younger Anna Oberg entered his life in the early 2000s, representing a powerful woman focused on health, discipline, and direct presence. Their meeting was not nostalgic or shared memory, but when Paul Anka was trying to reclaim his private life following a divorce at approximately 4 decades of music. This friendship blossomed so quickly that it left behind silences from his past emotional life. The wedding happened. Location in 2008, anticipating a late but fuller start. A man who believed he could be a spouse and parent again and followed traveling schedules. Ethan's birth didn't only reshape the family, it put Paul Anka back in his old role lost years ago due to distance and time. Being a father in his 60s were colored differently. Stages fewer, music more present, effort to keep the relatives nearby. However, that marriage didn't flow as he hoped. Financial pressure, generational disparities, control, and how each family member eventually envisioned their job became unfixable. Conflict swiftly brought private areas into the public eye. Escalated. Legal documents included accusations, lawsuits, and sworn statements. Records reveal a brief marriage to the media. A divorce 2010 didn't resolve conflict. It started another long fight. Child custody-focused years. Then, Paul Anka was no longer a stage icon, but a father in risk of losing everyday presence son's life. Hearings, psychological exams, music, and private legal exhaustion was different from touring. The final verdict gave him not a success, but survival was maintained when custody was preserved in 2017. The only role that felt clear was Ethan's father for Paul Anka after that interaction. In the years that followed, he focused on raising his son, staying well, and clear separation from new emotions. No longer seeking compensation, longer risking romantic restarts. Anna Oberg's relationship ended in love, power, and loss caused him a deeper exhaustion. Directly, without time or compromise, reducing impact. After years of wear down by legal issues and rigorous attention, Paul Anka entered another connection with a new outlook. Lisa Peton appears his life was already narrowed. No longer based on a tight music stage schedule or rash decisions. A slower, stiffer rhythm focused on preventing further collapse. Their meeting did not ignite his interest. This happened silently in the context of a guy used to losing control, striving to build steadiness late in life. Marriage was formalized in 2016. No show or noise, like a option of repair over start. Paul Anka's life changed during their time together, more private music. He cut public appearances and performance responsibilities, spent much of his time at home trying to keep a regular routine structure. Absence of children in their marriage was both relief and responsibility and evidence that the connection was different. Relationship rather than musical family. Outward quieted not mean inner peace. Age and music disparities and how each faced pressure and unresolved relationships progressively brought into daily life. Paul and Kanto, this marriage with a history of music discipline. Helpful traits survive on stage, but weigh down privately. In contrast, Lisa Pettenhand refused to live in that past. There were no public disagreements. Conflict. Their silent accumulation was long and continuous, making shared life stressful and difficult. Around 2020, reflecting about his youth, recognizing time no longer allowed him to tolerate a troubled marriage, Paul Anka paused music. Not one music incident prompted the breakup, decay of powerlessness in his life, which he was attempting to save. The split occurred quietly. No conflict, no legal issues for kids. But it left different nothingness. The feeling that despite slowing down, he could not locate a place to halt. Song. Paul Anka's Lisa Peton relationship emerged colder about his boundaries. No longer believing without the misconception that living experiences life, marriage is salvation's framework, naturally harmonizes music, he closed that door exhausted. And clarity. What left was minimal. The fatherhood, work, and music protected privacy distance, where emotion no longer influenced survival decisions. Entering 2025 saw Paul Anka's life rhythm narrowed distinctly his music. Though he did not disappear, he no longer led any cycles. Music was his career when his marriages ended, and he withdrew from public romance. Activity was mostly behind the curtain during this time. No tour schedule, no tour announcement, no album. Stage appearances, if any, selective, limited to private music invitations or small engagements where physical demands, time, and control were his. Anka reviewed his 6-decade-long song collection. Copyrights, film, advertising, and digital platform licensing, engaging actively in old recordings, remixing, updating, or released. He composed to ensure his identity was on his songs at this age, not to chase the market that would stick to his context. The work was peaceful and required rigorous discipline, reflecting his control instinct from Las Vegas into private life. 2025 saw Paul Anka's name continue to be drawn back by younger music audiences without his consent. Old tunes appeared widely on social media, cut and reused fundamentally different from when they were born, forcing him to intervene remotely to preserve the final write-off decision. He avoided that wave's media campaigns, didn't explain or tell legend. Being his own gatekeeper, he remained only that legacy. In private, Paul Anka's 2025 routine was tightly related to fatherhood, health, and employment stability. Disconnected from lights, music existed daily, yet there was no clapping or stage crowds. Decisions were made quietly, scenes there he did what he always did best. Maintained speed and order, and refused to lose life again. Paul Anka leaves an intractable legacy. Graphic or sales data. He weaved his song across life's strata. From a 1950s impetuous youthful fever to studios where songs were customized for other voices on Las Vegas music stages where discipline and control values were measured. His tunes were not the only ones crowds could sing. He was a man who realized early on that industry's strength lies in authorship, preserving the song before millions forget it. From Diana, which gave him recognition before he was old enough to be an adult, to My Method, which became the universal confession that transcended the writer, Paul Anka ways at cultural turning points. That legacy also has permanent music scars. He grew up quickly due to early success that could last. Long family absences pay for professional endurance. The steel-disciplined artist's egos sometimes weighed them down. His companions. However, those contrasts make Anka's story rough. Polished. More like life than music legend. When his songs What Happens When an Old Musical Fragment Wakes Up on a Modern Platform and is performed by new generations, residual nostalgia, and a chilly lesson in long-term survival, this industry loves to forget its old names. Paul Anka need not be at the end of the voyage, presented as a flawless music legend. His multifaceted life makes him valuable. Act, write, control problematic artist who keeps playing. Songs continue to go their own paths without man. There's Paul Anka. Legacy reminds. Fame comes early or late, but only those who maintain its form long enough to hear themselves sung again in their terms. Ever sung along to a Paul Anka song without remembering where you were? Heard it first. If you've noticed a familiar melody throughout your life, you've heard My Way song, and know it was never just a song. Say something for the man who spent his life producing music that outlasted the AGE made him. So keep investigating the real people behind the spotlight. The tough choices. Fund the channel. So we may keep presenting stories behind famous stories that need to be addressed.